Hey guys, I wanted to make you guys a little tutorial on how to track your hours and report them on your supervision experience forms. A lot of you are having a hard time with determining how many hours do you have in a supervision cycle, how do you split those up between supervisors, and how do you report those. So we're going to go over that today together. So what you first want to do is access the Google spreadsheet that your hours go into. So you can access this by going to Blackboard and clicking on your hours tracker. I'm not going to do that for you guys on here right now because I don't want to use a student again for that. So I did actually make a sample tracking form here from a copy so I can show you how to do it once you get here into the Google spreadsheet. So once you're in the Google spreadsheet, you do not have permission to make any changes to the spreadsheet because this is the information you put in on your form. So what you'll want to do is you will actually want to download this as an Excel file. So I'm going to download this as a Microsoft Excel file, and there we go, I have this. So now I can actually work with this file and I can format it and make changes. So what I would do first is you don't really want this timestamp column. This just tells you when you tracked your hours, and it's confusing to have it in there. So go ahead and delete that out. Now, for a lot of you, you guys have been trying to go back and figure out what your hours are. So when we're looking at this date column here, it's actually not in chronological order. So what you'll want to do is go ahead and highlight everything that you need there, sort and filter, sort oldest to newest, and sort. This will put all of your hours into chronological order, and it'll make it a lot easier to work with and determine how many direct and indirect hours you have. So the next thing I want you to do is open up your calendar on your desktop. So when we're looking at a supervision period is 2 weeks. So it is always a 2-week period. However, we also need to look at our hours on a weekly basis because you do need to have a minimum of 10 hours and you cannot go over 30 hours in any given week. So for ease, I usually start with the Sunday to Monday supervision cycle. So if we look here, we do August 30th to September 5th would be my first week. So what I often do is I go ahead and I just put in a space here. And then I highlight this week here in one color. Then I go back to my calendar, check, okay, my next supervision cycle or week is the 6th through the 12th. So I'm going to go here. There's my split. There we go. So I'll go with another color here. And I'm going to go ahead, you guys don't need to delete the client initials here, but I'm going to do that because it'll actually make it a little bit easier for me to work with without giving the identity of the sheet away. Okay. So there's a few things that I want to check here now. So I first of all want to make sure that I didn't go under my hours in that week or over my hours. So I'm going to do just a little sum function, so equals sum, parentheses, and then I'm just going to sum up these hours here. And so here I have 12.25 hours. So I had the minimum of 10 hours and I didn't go over 30. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Equals sum. All right, 13.3 hours. So, or excuse me, 13.5 hours. So once again, I did not go under the minimum of 10 hours per week and I did not go over the maximum of 30. So I know that I'm good to go. I can count all of these hours as long as I have enough supervision. So the next thing that I want to look at is do I have enough supervision to count all of my hours? So remember, you must have at least 5% of your hours are spent in supervision. So here I've got 13.5 and 12.25 hours. So that is, and I'm going to go ahead and just go over here for another sheet here. and say, week 1, week 2. So the number of hours that I have total are 12.25 and 13.5. Next thing I want to look at is the number of supervision hours that I have. So here, look, I had in that first week 1.25 hours of individual supervision. I'm going to call these service hours, individual and group supervision. Okay, so I'm going to look here at this next week, and oh man, I don't have any supervision hours in here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little sum function here. So I've got 25.75 hours. So what I want to look at now is say, how many hours of supervision do I need to count all of those hours? So what I would do is just do equals. I'm going to take my total for that 2-week period times 0.05. This will tell me how many hours of supervision that I need in order to count all of my hours. And I need 1.2875 hours of supervision. That it really is close enough to 1.25. We round to the nearest quarter hour. So 1.25 hours is perfect. I have enough hours of supervision to count all of the hours that I accrued in that 2-week period. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to look at is how do I move these onto my supervision form. So I am going to go ahead and open up my supervision tracking form. And I'm just going to do this here on the form. You guys can absolutely do this on DocuSign. But for ease right now, I'm going to do this on the form. So I'm going to fill out the form here. So I'm going to put my name. My supervisor is Jane Doe. All right, so my supervisory meeting dates. Let's see here. Okay, so here I only have my individual supervision. So I'm only going to count. Oops, and the date on that was 9/3/2015. Okay, 9/3/2015 for 1.25 hours. That was an individual supervision. And my supervisory period is 8/30/15 to, let me check my calendar here, 9/12/15. Oops. All right. So the next thing I need to look at is how many independent experience hours did I accumulate and how many of those were spent in direct implementation. So I can go back over here to my spreadsheet and I just make these calculations right here. I do indirect. So my total hours I can bring from here 25.75 hours. So I have 25.75 hours. Now I need to figure out how many of those hours were spent in direct service experience. I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to sum all of my direct supervision hours. And you can just do equal sum and then use the control function here, control key, and select for that 2-week period all of the hours spent in direct experience. I know that these are direct experience because they're labeled right here to the right. Okay, so I spent 11.25 hours. So these are reported in hours and minutes, so that's 11 hours, 15 minutes. So we go to 11.25 hours. Oops, there we go, wrong place. All right, so number of individual supervision hours, I had 1 supervision hour, and I had 0 group supervision hours. So my total experience hours are going to be that 25.75 plus my 1 hour of group. So I accrue 26.75 hours total. All right, so the next thing I need to look at are the task list items that I covered. So I can go back over here and I have identified, oh, look at all the areas that I covered. So I have problem identification and measurement under client-centered responsibilities, philosophical assumptions, definitions, and examples under foundational knowledge, and measurement and experimental design under basic behavior analytics skills. So if you do not have your task list 4 sheet here saved onto your hard drive, we do have it posted on Blackboard, but you can also find it at the BACB website. So I'm going to go to www.bacb.com, go to Documents, 4th edition task list, 4th edition task list in English. Okay, so first domain is that basic behavior analytics skills. So looking over here on my hours tracking form, I said that, hey, for basic behavior analytics skills, I went over measurement and experimental design. So I am going to find that section A is measurement and experimental design is section B. So on my supervision form, I'm going to list A and B. Then I'm going to go to the next section, which is foundational knowledge, client-centered responsibilities. So I have listed that I did problem identification, measurement, implementation, management, and supervision, and assessment. So I covered a lot of areas in this topic area. So I'm going to go over to my task list and scroll down to my next section. Okay, so did I say problem identification? Yes, I did. So that's G. And let's see here. The next thing I have is measurement. I said I covered measurement. Did I cover assessment? Yes, so I'll go ahead and do H and I. Next thing we have on here is intervention, implementation, management, and supervision. So did I say that I did all those things? Implementation, management, and supervision. Did I say I covered intervention? Yep. So I covered those areas as well. So J and K. And then we're in foundational knowledge. So for foundational knowledge, all of these are FK. So I go and say, hey, did I track anything in foundational knowledge? And, oh, yep, I did. So I'm just going to mark FK on my supervision form. So I'm saying, hey, you know what? I covered all of these task list items during the supervisory period. And I also want to look at, did we discuss specific clients? So when I was individual supervision, yep, I totally discussed that client. We have a release of information, so that client's privacy was protected. I didn't talk about it at a restaurant with my supervisor. I made sure that we kept everything confidential. My individual supervision was in person. And it was supervisory discussion and feedback. So the difference between observation and supervisory discussion and feedback is observation, your supervisor is actually observing you engage in behavior analytic activity. So for example, when we do some competency evaluations in the future, you'll do that observation of supervisee either by video or in person. If somebody comes into your classroom and observes you in your classroom implementing, and that's your supervisor, then you would do that observation in person. But if you're just meeting with your supervisor one-on-one and you're talking about your cases, that's going to be supervisory discussion and feedback. And that's either going to be in person or remote. Next thing is, did my supervisor give me any readings? Yep. She told me to read chapter 1 in Cooper. Okay. So I go ahead and then I will, in DocuSign, sign the form here, date it, and send it to my supervisor. So that one's a little bit easier because I only had one supervisory experience during that 2-week period. However, a lot of people, what they struggle with is, well, what do I do if I have both group supervision and individual supervision? So that's what we're going to go over next. So we're going to look at our next supervisory period here. So we've got September 13th through the 19th. Put one in here. And then the next thing I have is the 20th through the 26th. Okay. So once again, I'm going to check to make sure I have my minimum number of hours and I did not go over the maximum. And I like to do these colors because it helps me keep track of my supervisory periods here. So I'm going to do another highlight. Okay. So here, yep, I had more than 10, less than 30. Let's do this one. Once again, more than 10, less than 30. So I might go over here. I'm going to do week 3 and week 4. So week 3 of supervision, I have 14.75 hours. And then week 4 of supervision, I have 15.5 hours. And then I'm going to look for my hours of supervision. So I had 1.5 hours of individual supervision, another 45 minutes of individual supervision, and 1.25. So that's 2 hours, 3.5 hours of individual supervision. And actually, I'll separate that by week here. So in week 1, I had 1.25. And 1 hour of group. And then for week 2, I had 45 minutes and 1.5 hours. So I have 2.25. Let me just double check my math here. 2.25. Okay, so if I do my sum here, I have that total of 30.25 equals that 30.25 times 0.05. So I needed 1.5 hours of supervision. So there are just a few different things that you can do here when you report this on your form. So I need 1.5 hours of supervision. I know that at least 50% of my hours must be spent in individual supervision. So if I look here, I'm like, man, I have a lot of individual supervision and then only the 1 hour of group. So you know what I'm going to do is I want to maximize my indirect hours. So I'm going to say, you know what, during group, we did talk about cases. We applied the research to our cases. I can count some of that time towards my consultation with other behavior analysts. Or say, hey, you know what, I want to take some of my individual supervision and use that as consultation with another behavior analyst and just do the observation piece for supervision. So what I can choose to do is I can say, hey, you know what, I need 1.5. So you know what, I'm going to keep 0.75 of the group and 0.75 or 1 hour of my individual. We'll just do 1 hour and 1 hour for ease. Okay, so now I have equals 1. So I can actually add an extra 2.5 hours to my indirect experience if I do that. So I will look here. I just want to make sure that I still have enough supervision if I do that. Plus this. Okay, so if I did 0.05, this, there we go, not 0.5, 0.05. I would need 1.63 hours. So if I move 2.5 hours over to indirect experience, I need 1.64 hours of supervision. So if I have 2 hours of supervision during that supervisory period, I'm good to go. So what I'm going to do is this is going to be the number that I report on my supervision form. So I'm going to open up a new supervision form. Type in my name. Okay, so now we got to look at it and say, okay, I have 2 supervisors now. So, I'm your group supervisor, but then you have a different individual supervisor for most of you. So I'm like, hey, how am I going to go ahead and break this up? Well, if I look, I say, hey, you know what? In week 3, I'd had group supervision. So I'm going to count all my week 3 hours on my group supervision form. And then I'm going to count all my week 4 hours on my individual supervision form. So week 3, I had 14.75 hours. So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and say my group supervisor. So that's me. Supervisory meeting dates and duration. So that week we had group supervision on the 17th for 1 hour. Okay, that was group supervision. Now my supervisory period is still that 2-week period. So you need to make sure that you have that 2-week period as the supervisory period. That's to ensure if you get audited by the BACB, you are showing that you had a 2-week supervisory period because of that 50% group versus individual criterion. So my supervision period is the 13th through the 26th. It says number of independent experience hours accumulated excluding time spent with supervisor. So I'll go over here to this sheet and I said, oh, I have 14.75. How much was spent in direct implementation? Once again, I just need to sum that up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. 5.45. But oh wait, I just noticed something that might be a little bit of a problem. I have an individual supervision on here. I cannot sign off, as the group supervisor, I cannot sign off on that individual supervision time. But hey, guess what? You said, I'm going to move 2.5 of my supervision hours over to indirect experience. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that 1.25 here, I'm going to call that indirect now. So now, even though it was individual supervision, I'm counting it as indirect, so I can count those hours in that time period. All right, so number of individual supervision hours accumulated is 0. Small group is 1. And total number of experience hours is 15.75. And actually, guys, I just realized I made a little mistake there, is I counted that supervision time in there, so that should be 13.75 here. Because we have to remove all the supervision time off of these independent experience hours. So you have 14.75. 0.75 hours. Once again, you would go through your task list items, mark the appropriate columns here. If you had an assigned reading, write it down, sign it, date it, and send it to your supervisor. So now we have these other hours over here that are unaccounted for. So what you would do is sum up these hours, figure out how many hours you have here, and send those hours to your independent supervisor. So once again, you make sure your supervisory period is still that 9:13:15 to 9:26, but instead of you're going to change your supervisor. So my supervisor is Jane Doe. I had an individual meeting. My individual meeting was, or meetings. Let's see, so I already counted 1.25 there. So I'm going to say, you know what, I'm only going to count 1 hour of this 9:24 meeting. So I'm going to say, okay, 9/24/15 for 1 hour. And I'm saying 1 hour because I'm going to move the rest of that time to indirect experience. And then I go up, sum all of my independent hours, then sum up the number that are spent in direct experience for that week. Number of individual supervision hours, my group supervision is not going to be 0. And then I sum up my total here. Once again, sign it, date it, and send it to my supervisor. So I hope that this helps clarify some of that supervision piece for you guys, how to track your hours and how to report it on the forms and keep it separate between your group and individual supervisors. If you have any questions, or let's say you start doing this and you're stuck, don't hesitate to ask somebody. So you either need to talk with your individual supervisor to help you break things up, or you need to speak with me and I can set up a time to meet with you. Regardless, it's best to go ahead and do this right away. Get your supervision forms in right away, and make sure that you remember we reviewed those, the criterion. It's listed in your syllabus for supervision from the BACB, but it's also here on the BACB website. Go. So you did that supervision training. All of that information about the minimum and maximum number of hours, group versus individual supervision, was in that training. But you can also access that here with documents. See if I can find the right one here. BT. Experience standards and forms. And if it opens, which this link has not worked for a couple of weeks, I have emailed the BACB about this because it won't open up. So it is listed up here right now. The link is not working, so it's not the best resource. The BACB has been notified that the link is broken, and hopefully they'll have that. I also have this downloaded, so if you need a copy of it, I can send that to you. All right, once again, if you guys have any questions, definitely let somebody know, and we will help you out. All right, thanks.